First up, we have to talk about a couple terms. Intra-controller mobility and inter-controller mobility, the two different types of mobility that we're going to be working with. First up, intra-controller means that we have multiple APs, but those multiple APs reside on the same wireless LAN controller. So what's going to happen is if a client moves from T1 to T2, let's say that's the same user, this user moves to a different part of the same building, so to speak. This is usually what we'd see. That is intra-controller mobility, meaning we are going to have the same information stored here on the wireless LAN controller. The user will not know the difference. We don't need new IP addressing. We don't need any of this other information to make things happen because guess what? Our wireless LAN controller is the same. Our control point is the same. Now, this is different from an intercontroller mobility, in which case we're moving from a Cisco AP, let's say this is AP1, 2, and 3. We're moving from AP2 to 3. Now, this is a little different because the wireless LAN controller you can see here is different as well. As long as we are within the same mobility domain, though, the client can then again remain unaware of what's happening. What happens is the list of configurations, the authentication, all of this information, the client list, is shared between these two wireless LAN controllers at the point of handoff. So intercontroller mobility is actually maintains the same. They call this a layer 2 intercontroller mobility because we are not moving outside of the subnet. You can see here the subnet remains the same. So our information remains the same. I still have the same IP address. I don't have to re-authenticate unless my DHCP lease expires, unless something happens, like I drop off the network, go into sleep mode, or some other thing with the laptop. Everything remains the same, and the client doesn't know any different because all its information is the same. Now, there is layer 3 intercontroller mobility. That is a little different. Layer 3 intercontroller mobility is something outside of this domain, but within a certain portion, which we will talk about later. It's within it's within the same campus network or campus architecture or organizational architecture, but it's outside of our mobility domain. Has a different subnet, has a different all sorts of different configurations. What it's going to do is it's going to use one of these, the transferring wireless LAN controller, as kind of an anchor. And we're going to dive into the layer 3 intercontroller mobility configuration in much more depth a little later. But I wanted you to be aware there's a difference here when we talk about intercontroller. There's a layer 2 and a layer 3. Layer 2 is when we're within the same subnet, but there is some mobility even at layer 3 when we're moving across. So very interesting setup here, right? We have the ability to move, as you might expect, on the same wireless LAN controller. Something you might not have expected to happen was the ability to move a client between different wireless LAN controllers within the same domain. So very interesting, and it is the basis for the entire lesson moving forward, is how this process actually takes place.